What's up, everybody? I'm here with the latest episode of Business Bible Study. If you're new, Business Bible Study is where I walk through the John Maxwell Bible to learn more about being a great leader and more about the Bible. In this episode, I am going to focus specifically on one part of Genesis, literally just Genesis 5. And it's interesting, and you'll see the theme of this is that it's all about time, because it has taken me way too long to film this episode. Life has been lifing, as they say. But and I think there's reason for it, because the longer I take, the more I think about it. So I hope that I can get everything out in this episode as we go through it. And I've actually taken the advanced work of highlighting areas in this scripture, and you'll see the theme kind of jump out. So let's jump right in and read this verse. So we're in Genesis 5. So we're going to jump right in. So this is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created mankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them, and he named them mankind when they were created. So check the highlights and focus on the theme here. So when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Although Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Although Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Canaan. After he became the father of Canaan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Although Enosh lived a total of 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. After he became the father of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Although Kenan lived a total of 910 altogether, Kenan lived a total of 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. After he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalalel lived a total of 895 years, and then he died. When Jared lived a total of 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. I'm going to get that wrong, so just live with me. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more because God took him away. When Methuselah lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. And after he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. I think that's the Lord playing with me by having that word be in this scripture more than anything else. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah and said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So that's Genesis 5. So I want you to look at the theme. I'm going to go back through this just so you see the theme. All right, so let's go back through this. and I just want you to see. So look at this page. 130 years before he had a son. I just want you to take that note there, right? Then he lived 800 years and then had other sons. Then he lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. Let's look at Seth. Seth lived 105 years, and then he had a son, Enosh. Then he lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. And then he lived a total of 912 years before he died. Look at Enosh. Enosh lived 90 years before he became a father of Canaan. Then after he became the father of Canaan, he lived 815 years and then had other sons and daughters. Then he lived a total of 905 years before he died. Let's look at Kenan. Kenan lived 70 years before he became the father of Mahalalel. Then Kenan lived 840 years before he had other sons and daughters. Then he lived a total of 910 years before he died. Mahalalel lived 65 years before he became the father of Jared. Then he lived 830 years, and then he had other sons and daughters. He lived a total of 895 years. Then he died. Jared lived 162 years, became the father of Enoch. Then Jared lived another 800 years and had other sons and daughters and lived a total of 962 years. Enoch lived 65 years, became the father of Methuselah. Then he walked with God for 300 years, then had other sons and daughters, and then a total of 365 years. Then Methuselah lived 187 years before he became the father of Lamech, lived 782 years, and then had other sons and daughters. Then he lived a total of 969 years before he died. Then Lamech lived 182 years and had a son, who was Noah. Then after a son was born, he lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Then he lived a total of 777 years before he died. And then Noah was 500 years old before he had kids. Do you see the theme that I am bringing out here? That we always think about losing things. But if you notice in this scripture, the biggest thing of value that we have lost through the years is time. And the theme of this to me is that time is greater than money. So why would I say that? I say that because if you look at this, think about our current day and age, and we think about the average lifespan of someone, and we think about when people have children and when people pass away, right? Look at these numbers. 130 years before he had a son. 105 years before he had a son. 90 years before he had a son. 70 years before he had a son, right? Look at the lifespans. 800 years. Had more kids at 800. 900 years before they died. 800 years. Had more kids. 815 years. Had more kids. 840 years. Had more kids. We can't even contemplate having that much time in our lives. And if you notice the theme here, right? God works in sequences, and there's no such thing as coincidences. He had them live to certain thresholds before they had kids. And then he had them live another threshold before he allowed them to have other kids. And the sequence goes step by step. But just imagine a lifespan like that. We can't imagine it because we haven't seen it. We celebrate someone who reaches 80. We celebrate someone who reaches 100 years old. But we cannot even rationalize what it looks like to live to these numbers. And I think we don't realize one of the biggest things we lost in the fall of man is the time that God gave us, right? If you think back to Adam and Eve, I'm sure at that stage there was eternity, right? There was no end to that. And when they fell and went to the earth, they still had, to their point, shortened time, right? They only had 800 years, then 865 years, and 910. So it's all relative. If you go from eternity to 900 years, you realize like you lost something. But imagine us going from 900 years to 60, 70, 80, right? So this kind of shows what I believe the most valuable thing in life, the most valuable thing in business is time. It's not money, right? So let's show some other illustrations of that. So I'm going to come back here and then I'm going to show you another illustration of the value of time. So I'm going to make sure I'm good there. I'm going to get this ready. All right, so we'll be ready when we come back there. So let me show you this illustration. So make sure I'm all set here. So let's think of this as the time span that we heard in there. So let's say this is 1,000 years to 0. So we were seeing things like, people being 187 having a baby. Then we were seeing people being 800 and having more babies. And then we were seeing people at 900 die. Right? Now, this is their continuum. But think about it relative to ours. So if we matched our current lifespan down here, it would literally only look like this. And we would say things like 20, become a father. Say 35, you might become a father again. Then 60, if you're hopeful, 80. So I give you that visual representation of how much more valuable time is, because that's how much we lost. But we don't think about it, right? We don't think about the value of, I'm trying to get this out of the way. Sorry. All right, it'll stay there. So we don't think about what we've lost because we don't put it in the right context. But imagine if we knew that this is how much we lost from a time perspective, and this area right here is what we're trying to make sense of. Is this a little bit of time? But we had all of this time. So that's the first thing, right? Now we know the concept of what we've lost from a time perspective. So now let's look at what we have, right? And think about, how do we value that time? Do we value our current lifespan? But, let's look at this in terms of work. So I'm going to go to my boy Gemini, and I'm going to ask him, can you show me what was the origin of the 40-hour work week? So how do I equate this to work? Well, if you think about it, in work and time, everything is conceived around time. First and foremost, most people who work at hourly wage equate time for money, right? They talk about, well, I only work X number of hours to get paid X number of amount. But that wasn't always the case, right? So I brought this up, and, I'll see if I can make this bigger just to show you. So, this reads, the origin of the 40-hour work week is a story of gradual change driven by the movement, forward-thinking industries, and government legislation, right? In the 19th century, during the Industrial Revolution, workers had endured extremely long hours. Labor movements began advocating for shorter work days, with the 8 hours labor and the 8 hours recreation and the 8 hours rest slowly gaining popularity. So I want to stop there. We don't even think about it. We take that as commonplace, as something that we always had. It always wasn't there, but it was defined by another time. And we still, to this day, work on the 8-hour workday, the 40-hour work week, and saying that that's fair. So the 40-hour work week wasn't even codified until 1938 in the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? And we take that as Bible. But if you look at that in context of time, if I go back here, right, We only do that because we think we should only be doing something in a limited amount of time, because we're starting at a place of a limitation, because we didn't know how much time we lost from the olden times of the Bible. Right? So that's point one. So if I go back here, I'm going to ask him another question. So let me find my thing here. Can you tell me when the concept of overtime was created, and then the concept of salaried positions, and what type of positions had salaried positions? So I bring this up because now the whole premise is that we are constrained to a 40-hour work week. And then we start talking about that if I work past that 40-hour work week, I should get overtime, because I've already constrained myself that 40 hours is where I determine my value. And when people come into the workplace, they come with that preset notion that if you ask me to work over 40 hours, that you should pay me extra. So the concept of mandatory overtime, same thing, was attributed to the Fair Labor Act, right? And the purpose of overtime was to just compensate workers for extra hours, but to encourage employees to hire more workers than overworking existing ones. So again, where we see this as this is great, we have fair rights, etc., this creates the standard of limitations. So it basically constrains that if I put you in a role, you can only exceed in that role in 40-hour increments, and then once you reach over 40 hours, I should pay you extra. And then it really sets a precedent that instead of me paying you a higher amount, I just go hire someone else to get that same 40-hour activity in unison with you. So it limits my ability to scale. But we don't see it that way, right? So let's talk about the shift. So those are hourly. We're basically saying that our time is worth whatever dollar amount that someone is giving you for that role. And we don't look at it that way, right? But the reality is you're saying that whatever skill you're developing is worth that hourly wage. And then we allow ourselves to work in that time and let the hourly wage increase be dictated by a bunch of factors, right, that are not in our control. So let's look at salary, right? So a salary position means an employee is paid a fixed amount regardless of the number of hours, right? And what types of salary positions? Executives, those who manage a business or department, supervise other employees. Administrative, those who perform non-manual work related to business. Professional, those who perform work requiring advanced knowledge in the field of computer science, learning or creative work. Computer-related, outside sales. So I'm going to go back to this and kind of articulate where I'm going with this. So the concept of time being greater than money, right? I would argue that if someone said to us that, hey, if you can choose to have more money now or have the ability to live to 900, 800, right? There's some people who will say no because they value that, but they don't realize how much you can get. Think about the lives of the people in that Bible verse, right? Imagine being able to live 100 years before you had your first child. The knowledge, the skills, the experience that you can impart on them. And then think about modern day when people have kids really young and their biggest regret is that they don't know enough about the world today to impart that. And we create those systematic problems, right? That's one. The second one is because we've narrowed it down to time from a 40-hour work week perspective, we are basically saying that the value of our activity is constrained to a specific dollar amount. And unfortunately, the constructs allow us to be okay with that. And again, give Myron Golden credit for this because this is where I learned it from, right? The 4 levels of value, right? There's implementation, there's unification, there is communication and imagination. So implementation means using your hands, right? And if you heard in those examples that Gemini gave me, that the 40-hour work week is really constrained to manual labor, which means it's using your body. That means you're a finite resource. But what they realize when they move the salary workers is that, hey, if I'm using my mind, then I can't limit that to a 40-hour work week, or I can't limit the impact of that work to be constrained in 40 hours. So when you're fighting to say, hey, I want my fair 40-hour wage, as opposed to thinking about how do I do tasks and services to allow me to move forward, you've created limitations, right? So that's the first level of value, which is implementation, basically trading time for money, trading with your hands. So why has time become important in that construct? Because at the end of the day, you can't do the same things physically at age 50 than you could when you were at 20. I'm 55. I can't do half the things. I don't even try to do half the things I could do when I was 20 or even when I was 30. So again, even if you're able to extract a high wage, if you're getting paid for your time, at a certain point, there's a diminishing law of return just because we have limited time on this earth, even far limited to what people had in early times of the Bible, right? And just to visually show you that again, so you have the construct there, this is the difference. So let's take that back to hourly working, right? You're getting paid for your hands, your physical activity. You get limited to 40 hours and then you get paid extra, but the cost of that is more of your time. I purposely, I hate the concept of people having two jobs, right? And here's why I hate the concept of people having two jobs. Because basically what you're saying is that if you're having two jobs, that you know full well the first job doesn't pay you well enough, and you are willing to go give another job that rest time. Remember, in the early definition, the whole premise of a 40-hour work week was 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of sleep, and then back to work. But if you work a second job, you have now devalued both of those, right? Because you're now getting, and most times people don't get a second job that pays necessarily more than the first job, or they would leave the first job and just go work at the second job and get more overtime, right? So if you think about that, those two jobs where it looks like there's more, it's actually a law of diminishing returns. I hate them. I hate them because it doesn't allow you to value the time, the most important thing, which is your time. So if you move into a salary role, again, there is a larger concept of creating time and for creating value that is not necessarily relative to your time. But as we know, just through the recent pandemic and now people going back to work, people are trying to pull you back into that construct of, hey, you need to spend X amount of hours here to justify the value versus you spending that time somewhere else where I can't constrain that value. So even now, the limitations are starting to move up, even to people who before thought that they were protected from that because they were salaried workers, right? So the premise of this is, how do you value your time, and how do you label value on your time, and how do you think about giving skills and getting knowledge to maximize what other people value in your time? Now let's move to the internet age, right? Where I can sit in front of a computer, record this video, put it on a platform like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, whatever have you. And if you believe that anything I'm telling you has any value, I have now exponentially increased the impact of that value just by creating this video. But there are many of you who would never buy this mic or would never buy a camera, who would never do this because you believe that this is not a good value of your time. But if you put that in contrast to all the hours you've spent physical labor, all the hours you've spent fighting for an incremental wage, all the hours you've spent in overtime because you needed extra money and you realize the only way you can make more money is to spend more time, then you would start thinking about that. If you would show that time is valuable to money, and if you took that time to learn a skill that wasn't defined by time, then you could be more successful. So that's the piece of it. The other one I want to go dig into is that if we now recognize that time is more valuable than money, that's my justification one. Justification two is how much time you waste, right? So the flip side of that is I meet many people and they say, you know what? You heard the concept of dead end job, right? So I also believe that if you want to move forward professionally, personally, from a business owner or skill set perspective, you should find a dead end job. And again, I say this without insult to anyone who has these jobs. When I talk about dead end jobs, are jobs that literally there is no career path to growth outside of spending time there and the laws that require people to grow them. So let's say you are sitting at a front desk, or you're an overnight security guard, or one of these things where you are minding an activity and that is your job. To me, I would get that job if I had the premise of learning a skill, because I could get time back. I know the parameters of that aren't changing, but I can take that time to learn a skill while I'm doing that job, right? The flip side of it, for many of you who say that your job is not where you need it to be and you just want to move and accelerate, the question is, where do you spend that time? I'm going to use the concept that was brought up by Gemini, the 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to rest, 8 hours to work, right? So many of us want to move forward, but then we don't leverage that time. So let me give you, everything's visual. Let me give you a visual example here. So if, you say the concept of a time, and I'm going to change this back to white. And let's say this is 12, this is 6, 3, and 8, right? 9, sorry, let's put that 9. So many of us, right, we work from, we don't look at it in these chunks, right? 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12. And if I put it this way, and let's say this is 12 to 12, many of us, we work from 8 to say 4. And then we have, we'll go to sleep, let's say 10. And then we'll wake up again. Sorry, that's the day. Then we'll wake up again at 8. I did this wrong. Hold on. All right, so let's look at an example of what I mean about wasting time. So if we draw this, and we say this is 12 to 12. So 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. So let's say many of us work from 8. We'll use 8 hours. We work to 4. Then let's say we go to bed at, did this wrong. Let me go back here. Say we did this. Say we go to bed at 10, and then we get to 12 a.m. So my question to you is, if you want to grow and do something different, how are you feeling? Sorry. How are you feeling this time? I can give you some examples. Netflix, Hulu, video games, right? So if you don't value that time, where are you going to find the time to move out of your current situation? Like, I have people come to me and they'll say, hey, you know what? I just want to start a business. I have all these ideas. I just can't find enough time in a day. And my argument is the time is there. You just don't want to use it for the things that you want to use it for. So the question is, how do you value time, and how do you value your capacity of time, right? Because it goes back to, if I believe that a 40-hour work week defines how I work, if a 40-hour work week defines how I work, if that 40 hours reaches my capacity, then I will never view that extra time as opportunity, because I believe that that is a premium time that I need to get back to rest. And I believe, look, everyone needs rest. I'm not saying that people should work. I'm saying that you have to look at time in seasons, right? There's this whole new concept of people talking about work-life balance. And many people have said there's no, I'm just trying to achieve work-life balance. To me, I've heard other people say this, that there's no such thing as work-life balance. There are seasons. The question is, are you in a season where you're sowing into yourself for the next thing? Are you in a season where you're reaping the harvest of the things you sowed into? Or are you in an idle season where you're comfortable wherever, even if you're not happy, you're comfortable? And the difference between when I'm saying that is, you may not be happy, but you're still comfortable enough that you're not willing to do the things that can enact change. And then lastly, if you're comfortable, you're impatient because you're not willing to put the time in to get to that next season. So you'd rather let things stay idle. So it goes back to my point. In this case, time is more valuable than money because even if you make money in that current state, you haven't done the things to consistently have that money come back through and change your state. So you're not leveraging time the right way.